Hi, dear ones. I'm going to introduce you to a ballad. Have you heard about a ballad? Do you know what a ballad is? It sounds new, right? So let me tell you what a ballad is. A ballad is a song narrating a story in short stanzas. These ballads are a part of folk culture. What do you mean by folk culture? Folk culture is it comprises of the traditional stories which is passed on from one generation to the next, isn't it? So this is a poem. It's actually a ballad. And you know what the poem is? A legend of the Northland. The story is written by Phoebe Cary. She is the poetess who has written this ballad. Okay. Now this story is of the Northland area. That is the area which is near the North Pole. You must be knowing, right? The equator, and on top is the North Pole and down is the South Pole. So this is talking about the area which is near the North Pole. So the particular place is not actually specified, but it just shows or says that it has happened in Northland. That means the area in the northernmost part of the earth. What is legend? What do you mean by a legend? Legend means what? It's a historical story, you can say. One which is very old and which has been passed on from one generation to another. That is what is called as legend. So now we are going to see this poem which narrates the legend of an old lady. She angered Saint Peter because of her greed. So we're going to see to this poem. What is the poem? Actually, it is the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. Greed. Okay. Greed means you can say ஒரு மைசர்னு சொல்லலாம், கஞ்சன்னு சொல்லலாம், இல்லை பேராசைன்னு சொல்லலாம். Greed. Okay. So let's see what happens in this story. Okay. Let me begin. Before that, I will first give you the summary of the poem, and then every stanza will be read out, explained, hard words will be given, and poetic devices also will be taught. Okay, children, let's start. The story goes like this. One day, Saint Peter is the apostle, you can say, or saint, you can say, follower, you can say, of Jesus Christ. What he was doing is, he went around the world and he was preaching about God. He was talking to people, he was teaching them, preaching about God. So as he was going around the world, he became very tired. And finally, he reached a cottage. Cottage is a small little house. And in that house, an old woman lived in that cottage. And she was making cakes. She was baking them on a hearth. Hearth is the place where you have an open fire, So on that she was making cakes. She was baking cakes. As Saint Peter was very tired, he was fainting with hunger. he was very hungry going round the world, he asked the lady to give him a piece of cake. The cake that she was baking, that cake actually appeared too big for her. So she did not want to give him that. Instead, what she did was she baked another smaller one. And as she baked the smaller one, she looked at the smaller cake. She found that also to be quite big. So she didn't want to give that. What she did was, the second time, she again started to bake another smaller cake. But when she looked at that, again, that smaller cake also appeared big for her. So she didn't want to give that to him. Now in the third attempt, what she did was, she took a very small scrap of dough. Dough is maav, the penanja maavuன்னு சொல்றோம்ல. She took a very small scrap, just a small piece. She rolled it so flat that it was so thin as a wafer, it seems. Wafer அப்படியே பட்டுன்னு அப்படியே உடைஞ்சிரும். And that thin the cake was. And when she baked that and looked at it, even that seemed to be a bit big for her. So she didn't want to part with that also. She didn't want to give that also. Now, will Saint Peter keep quiet? He was actually very hungry. And this, angered Saint Peter a lot. So he cursed her. He said, "You are not fit to live in human form, and you're not fit to enjoy the food and all the other earthly things that is found. So I curse you." He said he cursed her, and he transformed her into a woodpecker. Woodpecker is a bird. Have you all seen? It bores the wood. The wood, the tree, what it does, it keeps pecking, or it bores the tree, and that's how it lives. So that's why it is called as woodpecker. That bird is called woodpecker. So he said, you will be boring the wood and you will get very scanty food. Scanty means what? Very less food you're going to get. And what happened to her? As he cursed her, she became a woodpecker, and she was seen on all the trees all day, boring for food. See, that is why you should know, you should always have the tendency or that good heart to help somebody. Helping is very important. Giving is very important. Let us not be greedy as this old woman. See, this is just a story, but we learn so many things from this. You should not be greedy. That too, especially when somebody is hungry and when somebody is really in want. When they are really in need of something from you, you should never say no to them. You should learn to help somebody. That is actual humanity. So charity, humanity, good deeds, all this, is a blessing. When you really give it wholeheartedly, you get the blessing from God. But this lady didn't want to part even the smallest. Even like a wafer, the cake that was like a wafer, thin as a wafer it was, even that she didn't want to part with him or give him, which is not good, right? So let us not follow the lady, but let us be good and let us learn to give the needy. Okay? Yes, children. Now we will be reading the poem line by line, and I will be explaining to you the hard words and its poetic devices. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. Let's see to the first four lines. Away, away in the Northland. So it is talking about the area or the region that is somewhere in the North Pole. And you know, here the hours of the day are few, it seems. Why he talks about the hours of the day that is few? That's because it is winter time. And as you all know, that during winter, the nights are longer and the days are shorter. You must have learnt in your SST, right? So, this is also, he means during the winter season he's talking about. And he says that the nights are longer and the days are shorter, that they cannot sleep them through. In the fourth line, see that they. Who does this they refer to? They refers to the people who live in that region. And he says, these people, though they sleep during the nights, they get up early. When it is still night time, they get up because they are not able to sleep for long. And imagine how long the nights will be then, isn't it? So he wants to emphasize on the fact that the duration of the night is very, very long over here. Okay, let's see to the next stanza. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. Yes. What is the meaning of sledges first? Sledges is a vehicle, that has been pulled by these animals which live in the polar region, or you can say the cold region, like the reindeers, okay? And to harness means to tie the reindeers with a rope to a sledge so that it can pull, and that is used for transportation. Okay. Swift means something which runs very, very fast. So all this shows that it is winter time, and this Northland is actually very, very cold. It's got severe cold conditions. It is very snowy. You can imagine that it is a snowy area, and these reindeers are used. It's an animal which is found in the cold region, that is the polar region, you can say. So people, what they do is they tie these reindeers to the sledges, and these reindeers pull the sledges. Sledges is that vehicle I told you, right? The vehicle which has been used to pull or carry passengers and loads in the ice or snowy areas. He also says that the children look like young ones of a bear because their dress seems to be so. Have you seen the children or the people wearing these furry clothes like the bear's fur? That bear's hair, fur is that hair of animals. So have you all seen people like wearing such caps and sweaters like that? So very furry it will look. That is what he means, like a furry skin of a bear, he says. So children look funny. They look like when children wear such clothes, they look like these bear cubs. Cubs are these young ones of the bear. So that's what he means to say. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it is true, And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Curious. What do you mean by curious? Very strange. There's another word, TIS. That is the short form of it is. So what does he say in this line is, the first line says they. Who does this they refer to? They refers to maybe the elders, the older people. Tell them. Them refers to whom? The younger generation or the children, you can say. So they tell this story, a strange story this is. Curious story means a strange story, very different. He says, I don't believe it is true. It may be, it may not be true, but yet, they learn a lesson. The younger generation learn a lesson from this. The story gives us TALE, tale. Tale is story. So the story gives us a very important message. That's what he tries to say. So that is why this story is being told. Now let's see what the story is. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, Saint Peter. Who is the Saint Peter? I already told you. An apostle, a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ. So, we are going to talk about Saint Peter. Preaching. What do you mean by preaching? Preaching is to give a religious talk. Okay, talking about God. So this story is about Saint Peter. When he lived, long ago, he went around the world and he gave religious lectures, or you can say he talked about God to the people. And that is when this particular incident happened. Let's see what is that. He came to the door of a cottage in travelling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. What do you mean by hearth? I told you. Hearth is a fireplace where you do cooking. What happened here was, Saint Peter was moving around the world, I told you, right? He was giving lectures to the people. And finally, one fine day, what happened? He reached the door of a cottage. He came to a small hut or a small house where a little woman or a small woman, what was she doing there? She was actually making cakes or baking cakes, you can say. So she was baking the cakes in the fireplace that is called as the hearth. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her for her store of cakes to give him a single one. Faint. Faint means to be very weak, famished, totally exhausted, very tired, you can say. The whole day, Peter was going around. The entire day he had not eaten anything. And now he feels very hungry. And he was feeling very, very weak. He was totally exhausted. He was famished. So he went to this woman and she was baking cakes, isn't it? He asked for one cake from that woman. Because she was baking cakes, he asked one out of the many cakes that she had baked. So she made a very little cake But as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. See, this woman was actually very selfish. Saint Peter asked the cake from her store. She already had the cakes. But she didn't want to give the cakes from her store. Instead, what she did was, she started making a very small cake for him. And as she was baking, she looked at the cake that she was baking, and that cake also looked too big to be given to someone. This lady didn't want to share anything with anybody, right? So this cake also looked bigger. Let's see what she did. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. What do you mean by needed? See, this lady was such a selfish lady. Now she made the cake, even that seemed to look big, so she again needs the flour. Needs means penird, needed. Penird. Penenji. Now she's trying to make a smaller one. And as she was making the smaller one, what she did? She turned it over. The cake has to be turned both the sides, it has to cook, right? So when she turned it over and she looked at that cake, she felt that this cake also was as big as the previous one. Again, she was not ready to give this smaller cake to whom? To Saint Peter. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. Scrap, what do you mean by scrap? Is a small amount of dough, mav. Dough is that, penanja, mav. So she takes that the third time. Now the third attempt she's making. She took a very small amount of that dough, She rolls it. She rolled it. She rolled it to that extent that it became as thin like a wafer. Wafer is very, very thin. So she made it like a wafer and she baked it. This lady was a miser. அவ்வளோ ஒரு கஞ்சமாக இருந்தது. Miser means கஞ்சத்தனம். She was so greedy also that she couldn't give that thin piece of bread also to whom? To the saint who was very hungry. That's too bad, isn't it? For she said, "My cakes that seem too small, when I eat of them myself, are yet too large to give away." So she put them on the shelf. Now what this woman does is, even that wafer she didn't want to give, right? She says when she eats, she feels that it is very small, it seems. But when she has to give it to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given. So what she does is, even that wafer seemed to look big for her. So she packs up everything. She puts all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen. And she didn't give any cake to Saint Peter. Let's see what happened. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint. And surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. What do you mean by provoke? Provoke is cause to get angry, to make someone angry. And this Saint Peter, he was waiting patiently for her to give at least one cake. But she never gave him. So he became what? He became angry because he was hungry. And he was also feeling very weak. But what did this selfish woman do? She was not ready to give him even one small cake. So this bad behavior of this bad nature of that woman, she should also actually be called a greedy woman. This act of hers, angered the saint. Angered means he became very angry. And he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm." The meaning of dwell here is to live. Dwell means to live. Now, what did Saint Peter do? He cursed the woman. He said, "You are very selfish and you don't deserve to be or to live like a human being." He also said that God has given her food, shelter, fire to keep herself warm. But because she became very selfish, with all that resources she had, all the things that she had, she didn't want to share that with anybody. That showed that she was very selfish. So he actually was not happy with her behavior. So what did he do? He cursed her. Let's see what was the curse being given to her. "Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood." What do you mean by scanty? Scanty is very, very little. And boring means making a hole in something using a tool, or you can say digging. Okay? This Saint Peter, he actually cursed the woman. He told her that she would become a bird because she doesn't deserve. She really doesn't deserve. Deserve means அவளுக்கு அது அந்த ப்ரிவிலேஜை வந்து காப்பாற்றிக்க தெரியல. So she cannot be in human form. She, as a human being, she should know how to share or give things to others. But she was very selfish, which is not right on her. So she became a bird, just like the other birds build their houses, by digging the hole into the wood and collecting little food by working very hard. The whole day these birds have to go here and there, fly here and there. The entire day, these birds work and they get very scanty food, very little food. So the same way, she also should work hard in the dry wood all day, and she would get only little food and make a small place for her to live in. Got it? Yes. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. So he cursed her to be what? Saint Peter cursed her to be a woodpecker. She had no chance even to speak a word, just to say a word of sorry. No, there was no time given to her. She couldn't speak even a word. She flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a bird. See, this chimney is not the chimney as we have nowadays. It's entirely a different kind of a chimney. It will be built in the kitchen. You know, there will be a hole left in the kitchen so that the smoke goes up to the air. Okay, so this lady had a chimney, that kind of a chimney. So she just flew up through the chimney and flew out as a bird. So Saint Peter's curse converted the woman into a bird. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same. But all the rest of her clothes were burned, black as a coal in the flame. So what was she having? She had a scarlet cap. Scarlet is the bright red color, a brilliant red color, you can say, a bright red color cap. Only that cap remained the same, it seems. She was wearing a cap and that cap remained the same. And the color of the cap was red. That was on her head. And what happened was the remaining clothes, what she was wearing, you know, that was burned. And it became as coal in the flame because she went through the chimney, isn't it? So the whole the clothes that she was wearing turned black in color, just like coal. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Country schoolboy. Country means here it talks about the countryside, or you can say the rural area, the village side. Okay. So people who live in the villages, the small children, you know, who go to school, when they see this kind of a bird in the woods, they see that she stays there all the day and she keeps digging the wood with her beak to collect what? To collect her food. So whenever any child sees this kind of a bird, then his elders tell him that story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy and so, and she was cursed by whom? By Saint Peter, and was turned into a bird. They get a teaching. They give a teaching that they should not be greedy. Okay? So this is the poem and its meaning. I think you understood. Yes, I think you have understood the poem, and now we are going to see to the literary devices in the poem. First one is rhyme scheme. I want all of you to take out your textbooks and take page number 65. I want you to concentrate on the last words of each line. Okay? Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few. See, Northland and few. Does it rhyme with each other? No. They don't rhyme, right? So Northland can be given A, few can be given B. And the nights are so long in winter. Does it rhyme anywhere? All the three? Northland, few and winter? No. So what can it be named as? C. That they cannot sleep them through. Few and through. Do they rhyme? Few, through. Yes, they rhyme, isn't it? So few is given B. So the same B will be carried for through also. Got it? Now the same way it has to be done to all the other stanzas also. Try doing it. See, reindeer, A. It's the same rhyme scheme. A, B, C, B. Reindeer A, snows B, cubs C. Snows and clothes rhyme, so they're given B. So A, B, C, B. It's the same thing. Here again, third stanza. Story A, true B, lesson C, U is B again. So it is the same. It gets repeated. A, B, C, B. Got it? Now next is alliteration. You know what alliteration is, right? Alliteration is the repetition of a consonant or a vowel sound. Consonant sound in two or more close words. So let's see to the alliteration in the poem. Yes, now stanza 1 we shall see. Stanza 1, see the fourth line. That, they, them, through. That, they, them, through. Can you see? TH sound is getting repeated, right? Then can you see stanza 2? Stanza 2, it is, see the first line. They, the. Where they harness the is there, isn't it? So they and the can be taken. So they, the, TH again, TH sound is getting repeated. And see, can you see the third line? Third line in the second stanza, it is look like. Look like. So which sound is getting repeated? L sound is getting repeated. Next is the fourth line in the same second stanza. That is funny, furry. Can you see? Funny, furry. And what sound is getting repeated, children? F sound is getting repeated. So all these are what? Consonants or vowels? All these are consonants. Now let's see to the next stanza. Yes, see to the third stanza now. Try finding out, children. They, them. See, they, them. So TH is a consonant sound and TH sound is getting repeated. Come to the third line in the same stanza. Yet you. Yet you. See, Y sound is repeating. And then comes learn, lesson. Learn, lesson in the third line. L sound is getting repeated. And then tell, tale. The fourth line. Third para, fourth line. Tell, the tail is there, isn't it? So tell, tale. So T sound is getting repeated. Let's go to the fifth stanza. In the fifth stanza, see, can you see? Woman was. Woman was. Fourth stanza, there's nothing seen. So we are taking the fifth. See the fifth stanza, third line. Woman was. So W sound is getting repeated. And then comes, see the last line in the same stanza. Them, the hearth. Them, the hearth. TH, hearth. You can take that last TH. So these are getting repeated. TH sound is repeated. Stanza 6. Faint, fasting. First line. Faint, fasting. So F sound is getting repeated. And then comes the 8th stanza. The 8th stanza, it is still smaller. Still smaller. 8th stanza, second line. 7th stanza is nothing is there found. So we've gone to the 8th stanza. 8th stanza, see the second line. Still smaller. Got it? Still smaller. So which consonant sound is getting repeated? It is S sound. Got it? Now we come to stanza 9. Stanza 9, it is took tiny. Took tiny. See the first line. And then stanza 10, it is seem small. Seem small. Stanza 10, it is seem small in the first line. Then comes 13th stanza. 13th stanza, it is build birds. Can you see? Build birds. Okay. And then B sound is getting repeated. Then comes by boring, boring. By boring, boring, boring. So B sound is getting repeated. Got it? Yes. Yes, children. We actually saw the repetition of a consonant sound all this while, isn't it? And that's called as alliteration. Now we are going to see the repetition itself. So repetition is, what is repetition? Repetition is any word or sentence that is getting repeated. And when a word is getting repeated, it shows the emphasis, it lays the emphasis on it. Let's come to stanza 1. See, stanza 1 has got away, away, away. Can you see? That word is getting repeated. Come to stanza 9. Stanza 9, it is rolled and rolled. Can you see that? Rolled and rolled. So rolled word is getting repeated. Now come to stanza 13 and 16. Can you see one word getting repeated again and again? What is that? Try to find out. It is, yes, boring, boring and boring. Boring, boring, boring. Boring is the word that is getting repeated. Got it? Yes, children. Next comes enjambment. You know what enjambment is, right? What is enjambment? Running lines of poetry from one to the next without using any kind of punctuation to indicate a stop. So punctuation is not used over there, and even if you use the punctuation, suppose comma is there, it doesn't stop you there. The sentence doesn't get stopped there. So that is enjambment, continuation of the lines in the poetry. Now if you see the first stanza, it is the third and the fourth line. And the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So there's no pause over there. There's no stop over there. You got it? Come on. Now try finding the next one. Second stanza, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows. Is there any punctuation in the first line? No. So the line continues. See the second same paragraph, the same stanza. See this third and the fourth line. And the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. So there's no stop. You got it? Yes. Now let's see to the third stanza. Third stanza, 3 and 4. Can you see? Third and fourth line. And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Next comes stanza 4. It is again line 1 and 2. And then 3 and 4. See, line 1 and 2, can you see? Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, you know. So it just continues like that. Then comes stanza 10. Stanza 10 and then stanza 11. Find in stanza 10 and 11. It's your job now. You have to find the enjambment in stanza 10 and 11. Yes, let's move on to the next literary device, that is simile. What do you mean by simile? You must have learnt what simile is before. Simile is comparison using what? As or like. Like or as. As. Okay. See, you go to stanza 2. Stanza 2. The children look like bear cubs. So the children are compared with the bear's cubs. Isn't it? Cubs are what? Bear udiya kutti. Okay, so the children look like bear's cubs. So children are compared to bear's cubs. The same way you go to stanza 9. See, stanza 9 has got baked it thin as a wafer. Baked it thin as a wafer. So what is compared with what? Cake is compared to a wafer. Now let's go to the next stanza, that is stanza 15. You see, stanza 15 has got one, that is clothes were burned black as a coal. Clothes were burned black as a coal. So the color of the clothes, that is the burnt clothes, is compared to what? Compared to that of coal. Okay, it is compared with coal. You got it? So this is the comparison that we see in the poetry, and this kind of a comparison is called simile, and this simile is the literary device that is seen in the poetry. So I think I've done everything, and you must have understood the lesson very well. Thank you very much, children.